Welcome to another BlackBerry Central podcast. Today we're filming episode 8. I'm with Scott and I'm with David here today. How you guys doing?
Hey, good. How are you doing?
Great.
Good. We have a lot of cool topics to run over, a lot of leaks going on in the community, a lot of cool things going on. But let's start off with everyone's favorite topic, the BlackBerry Venice. We saw EV Leaks post on his Twitter account both a wallpaper with Quad HD resolution, if you want to call it that, or Super HD with 2560 by 1440 pixel resolution. But he also posted the back of the device, which showed the 18 megapixel fast focus OIS camera. And then not too long after that, it's like the BlackBerry police got a hold of him because all of a sudden everything was deleted. And that's pretty quick. And most of the stuff that he posts generally tends to stay on there, like his past leaks with the Venice. So it's interesting to see that this stuff was there and then gone a minute later. But of course, with the internet, everyone has the opportunity to grab it quick, and it's on there forever. And then we started to see a few things come out of BlackBerry where they showed off a bunch of slides showing, Hub and some of the other, Chromecast, some of that other cool Android-based stuff. Scott, what are you thinking? Venice leaks. Anything that you saw so far that kind of excites you?
The whole phone excited me from day one once they hauled it out at Mobile World Congress there. So the camera was actually earth-shattering to me. An 18 megapixel camera for a number of reasons. I just picked up a new DSLR and it's 18 megapixel. And now we're going to have one in a phone that's going to be 18 megapixel, which is pretty wild if you think about it. And just like we were discussing before we even started recording, Dylan, Samsung's going to be pushing out the S6, which we know the Venice is highly modeled off of, yet they're only going to push, a 15 megapixel camera? Is it 15 or 12? I can't remember now. Anyway, regardless, it's not 18. So it's a little interesting that here we have a device heavily partnered with Samsung, yet we're going to get something better than what they're pushing out now in the near future. So a little interesting there. OS side, still watching, wait and see. There's so many rumors, nothing's confirmed. The only thing we do know is, there's definitely that potential for it to be Android-based. Is that 100% sure? Who knows, right? We don't know until we actually see the device, or maybe it'll pop out for both Android and BB10, which is what I'm actually hoping for. So, you know what I mean?
Would you prefer the option to boot into either OS, or more of a purchase one phone with Android, one with BB10, and kind of you have to pick? Or what are you thinking along the lines of that?
Okay, so you're going to put me on a slight tangent right now?
That's right.
The whole BlackBerry Android, and here's how BlackBerry needs to make success and not fumble the launch of BlackBerry and Android if they're to do it. They need to do both OSs, i.e., and allow the user to choose the OS upon boot of the device. And on top of that, they cannot push out Android on BlackBerry and not allow the in-use guys the option to switch. So it's either through OTA, or it's through Link, or it's through an auto load on their website, something. But that's how BlackBerry will make success if they decide to go ahead and launch with an Android operating system. So that's what I want to see, is one device and the ability for either OS to go on there. So we'll have to wait and see on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are hoping for BlackBerry 10, especially within the community. But like you kind of touched on there, if they do launch and say, okay, this thing is Android powered, but we do know that in our own community of people who are longtime Moto supporters or prosumers, if you want to call them that, we know that they do side loading. They have all this, they make their own tools so that way they can access things. If we were to just say, if you really, really want BlackBerry 10, here's the tool to do it. Or, here's the OS for yourselves. If you want to take it upon yourselves, you can do it. Otherwise, we're selling this thing as an Android-based device. That would be cool, in my opinion, because then you don't let anybody down. But
Yeah,
I don't know. But
I would prefer to see, how we have the startup screen and say, the first screen is pick your operating system. That's how I would prefer, with the preload of being actually BlackBerry 10. And then once you got home on Wi-Fi, you go ahead, you download the Android OS. It flashes it over. Bye-bye BlackBerry 10, bye-bye, and hello Android, BlackBerry Android. That's what I would prefer to see.
If that's built in, that's got to be, I mean, that's probably a pretty serious file, the OS file for Android M. I'm not even sure, or for Lollipop. I'm not sure how big it would be, but I would imagine even to have them built in to the device, so they're on that loading screen when you boot it, I imagine it would take up a lot of like the internal hard drive space.
No. What I mean is BlackBerry tend to be the first OS on there. But
Okay.
when you get to the boot, the initial setup, you know, how you go through your languages and all that jazz, the first one that you go to is pick your OS. If it's BlackBerry 10, you just carry on. If it's Android, please log into a Wi-Fi, and then it downloads the new operating system, and then it goes through the flashing and the booting and all that, the loading of that operating system. That's how I would like to see it done.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't want, you know, I don't want to see two different BlackBerry devices out there. Two devices out there which are basically the same with two different operating systems. It's just going to confuse people too much.
Yeah.
I think the Venice looks amazing. And even recently, from a personal perspective, I picked up a Z30 just to go back to it and have that on-screen keyboard, which is phenomenal, and have that full 16:9 perspective on things. Whew, there she is. And so I've just found myself so much more intrigued by the new device that's going to have both that physical Passport keyboard and hopefully the Passport premium feel. That's the first thing I noticed about the Z30 picking it back up. It just feels kind of more plastic, a little bit more on the cheaper side, perhaps. Cheap's the kind of a dirty word for it. And so it looks like the Venice is going to maintain that Passport feel and have that ridiculously nice touch or the touch sensitive keyboard. And I've found myself wanting to scroll with the on-screen keyboard on the Z30. It's second nature. I've used the Passport so long. So it looks really interesting. I'm very intrigued by the Venice.
I was a 9810 owner, so I'm very excited for the slide form factor back. I really enjoyed it back those days. You know, the screen for just doing fill around on apps or whatever, and then when you want to punch out some serious text or serious emails, slide open that keyboard and go to town. And bringing the touch sensitive keyboard into the Venice will just make that experience amazing, I think. But you know, the OS is still the major question. I don't think anyone has any doubts now about specs, relatively speaking. The form factor, we all know it's based off the S6 Edge, and so on. It's, you know, what operating system is that going to come out on? And is it for sure Android? You know, why is that experience going to be like? Will the owners have the option to get a BlackBerry 10 Venice? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, release date wise, we talked about a few months back, and we always talk about it in our rumor roundups, which is why we always have those segments for people to try to keep an eye out on cool things coming up, and we do drop hints in there. And we talked about seeing this device at least teased or shown off in some fashion around September, October at the latest type thing, with a November release for some time for Christmas, making it one of the most competitive devices for 2015. Might be really cool and interesting to see how sales do within their first quarter of it being out there. But yeah, spec-wise, nothing's really left to the imagination at this point aside from the OS. And hopefully that is at least left to somewhat of a surprise to us, because of course we do have leaks, but it's always fun to have something that you don't know kind of come up and kind of shock people a little bit, which is really cool. Moving forward, we saw some interesting stuff leak out, a silver Passport running Android. And that caught a lot of people off, and you know, there had always been rumors about it for years now, really. But to look at it in video, it caught a lot of people off guard, saying, okay, wow, this is a little bit more believable at this point, rather than just to see a picture that someone could have photoshopped. And we did have ones that leaked out, and were not leaked out, but were more so released and said, oh, this is Android on there, and then were later said, this is fake, I photoshopped it. So, David, what is your first thought seeing Android running on a Passport? Have you seen that video?
I saw the picture for it. I didn't actually watch the video yet. It was very, I had that first look at it and that first kind of gut reaction was like, whoa, this could be real. This is actually happening. We're transitioning to more of the Android route, perhaps the road splitting maybe for BlackBerry, which could be good from the whole company perspective as far as what they're looking at for the consumer base, and then maintaining the business perspective as well on things and security and all the things that we know BlackBerry does really well. But that first gut feeling was just full of intrigue and interest. But that being said, like we've kind of talked about before recording, it could absolutely still be not authentic. And so there's no way to know until it's out there.
Yeah, and we're at a point where looking at those types of things, it could be either or. I could sit down tonight and make something up and then show it off and just say this is legit, and then not a lot of people will really know the better. And otherwise, that could be totally legit. And I shared within the BlackBerry Central team a couple days ago, what I was told was that certain prototypes of the device were released before production. So we're talking about a pre-production device, branded with a unit number of 158, which would be an Android core device, or 164, which would be a generic BlackBerry 10.3.2 base device. And we don't know, there's no real confirmations on that, but if you do pay attention to the videos that have been out there and pay attention to images of the BlackBerry 10 base devices, you'll get to notice that as well. I won't say anything, I don't want to show anything off, I'd rather wait, but we do have a post coming up on the site that I think a lot of people are going to be interested in and kind of get a good look at that. So we do have that coming in the next few days. So keep an eye out for some funky stuff with the silver passport. Aside from that, we move forward before we talk about that too much. If we were to talk about, since we're on Android anyways, BlackBerry 10's future with all this Android stuff, because I feel like, and I know a lot of people agree, that as soon as someone says Android in the BlackBerry 10 community, people freak out, they jump ship. Yeah, it's hilarious to watch, but there's so many people who the sky falls to them as soon as they hear the word Android. Scott, elaborate on that, because I know you have some opinions that way.
Oh, I kind of hit on what I expect from BlackBerry, and if they do go ahead and go the Android route, right? Yeah, and there's guys out there like calling for the death of Chen. I feel, like a lot of the hard fan core are want to see John Chen, hung from a yardarm if he goes this way, or if he goes and starts cutting or limiting the hardware division. And let's call a spade, guys. And John Chen wasn't brought into the company. He was brought in. Sorry, let me rephrase it. John Chen was brought into the company to save BlackBerry, not to save the BlackBerry. And there's a huge difference between that. And I mean, he was brought in to save the company as a whole, and not necessarily a hardware device. So if moving to Android is what's going to save hardware, i.e. actual physical devices out there, because the operating system's not being picked up on, then ultimately, and it saves the company as a whole, then that was the right decision, hands down. I personally still think that the operating system, BlackBerry 10, is going to be around for a long time. I personally think that if BlackBerry goes the Android route, they'll have two operating systems out there with BlackBerry phones, and it's not uncommon. It's been done with Windows Phone and Android phones, and there's a number of companies out there with both running. So, what's that? So it can be done, and I think that's the way they're going to go. So consumer phones, BlackBerry phones with Android on it, prosumers/enterprisers with BlackBerry 10. So maybe people should stop running thinking the sky's falling, because it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
And
we were talking before, we're just kind of, discussing things, and say tomorrow BlackBerry said, all right, BlackBerry 10's not working, we're going to stop development starting January 2016. They could totally do that. There's no indication of it, but they could do that. Some people seem to have the belief that all of a sudden their brand new purchased Passport or Leap or whatever it might be, Classic, is just going to stop functioning they're not going to be able to download apps anymore. They're not going to be able to use BBM or their email or whatever it might be, or BlackBerry internet service might stop for them, so they won't get data, kind of thing. It's inane to think that, I think.
Well, let's look at the prime example of the playbook. I gave up using my playbook in January. When did the production and development of that stop? It's been like years.
Yeah.
And it was still effective and it was still useful to me until January passed, when I said, you know what, it's just not cutting it anymore. And I picked up a Samsung tablet. So no, I'm not going to employ it, but I can still see how people would be upset in that, knowing that, their device is now end of life effectively, and they're not going to get any updates. They're not going to be able to keep up to speed, but you'll still be able to use that device until it's effectively dead. Yeah, it's, you know what I mean? And still be effective with it.
Yeah, look at BBOS.
Yeah, guys are still running with those things.
Yeah.
Somehow. I don't understand that at all. I think that fervor comes from people wanting BB10 to excel so much. And I understand that shock reaction of people hearing about going the Android route and BB10 dying. And that does get me miffed inside too, because the device isn't going to stop working. But effectively, in today's world, especially in the modern, like the mobile tech industry, the cell phone industry itself, things are moving so quickly, and it's the development itself. That's what people are looking for. People are looking to use their phones as more than just a phone. The email will still work. The internet will still work. You'll still be able to load APKs. You can use the Google Play Store, but slowly but surely, it's slowly going to die, and that's, I think, what people are scared for. It's crazy what phones have become. They become a replacement laptop. You're constantly getting development of software itself, the applications. It's unfortunate that I see, one kind of example is you go into BB World and refresh your app list to see what you need to update, and there's not any updates ever, and it kind of makes me sad a little inside. Like sometimes BBM will update, you'll get the blend updates and whatnot, but I go over to my HTC One, which I would never use as a daily driver because it's just so clunky, and Android OS I'm not a fan of as far as efficiency goes. But you go into the Play Store there, and the updates themselves, you can just tell that the development's behind it. And I think it's such a big sticking point for people is Apple created them, and the whole app fad, the whole app craze it's kind of here to stay. I don't think it's going anywhere, and I don't think that it's anything to overlook. And I know that's different than a lot of the BlackBerry users' concept, but it's such a big factor, I think, for just the normal consumer. And I know BlackBerry's moving away from the normal consumer, the average Joe, as you can see by the kind of the global usage rates. But that's just kind of the perspective that I see that's dangerous about that sort of heading down the end of life pathway.
It's seeing if I were to put my own perspective on the BlackBerry Venice, and I don't know if there's any interest in anyone and kind of watching, but appeal wise, the BlackBerry Venice looks to be an amazing device. It's got a great feel. It's, based on what we've seen, it looks to be an all-out, all or nothing kind of device for BlackBerry, and obviously there's a big mass appeal to it in terms of phones. Would I get one because it's Android based? Absolutely not. I love BlackBerry 10. I do emailing. I do minor social media. I do BBMing, and I do some minor texts. Other than that, it's a communication device for me. It's not a Snapchat toy. It's not a Tumblr thing. It's not. I could name a bunch of apps. It's not that for me. It's a phone that I use to help me get through my job and all kinds of things like that. It's not a toy. It's more of a tool, and that's at prosumer level where BlackBerry is BlackBerry because it's a BlackBerry. If I want apps, if I wanted to get into Snapchat and all that, I'd go out and I'd buy myself a Note 5 because I have no interest in a BlackBerry Android one. That's, why carry a second BlackBerry? It's got that security element to it, but otherwise I don't see the objective point for me to go out and buy a Venice for the point of having apps or anything like that. But that's just me. And there's people out there who are like, I love apps, but I like BlackBerry as a brand. I like their design elements. I like their key security features, and I use their enterprise features. and they'll be all over this device because that's, it's Android, but it's got a lot of BES packed right up the rear end into it, and that's the selling point of it. It's not a toy; it's a toy. It's like something in between there where people can use it both ways. Who do you see the Venice being marketed to, Scott, primarily? If we were to say one market and label it, what market would you pick?
Ooh, that's a good one. Venice, Android-based Venice.
Yeah.
Those guys who left BlackBerry for another device that still want those apps, but still would like to have a BlackBerry or a physical keyboard. That's who I think. So I can't really label anyone per se, but I think the Android thing could be just an intermediary to hopefully bring people back to BlackBerry 10. Well, if you go ahead and, because people don't want to come to BlackBerry 10 because they're scared of the lack of apps and so on, right? But if you can give them those core experiences that we enjoy on BlackBerry 10 on an Android device, and then people will understand like, oh, this is even going to be better on a BlackBerry 10, and I don't really care about the apps anymore, then maybe that they'll try an actual BlackBerry 10 device. The hub, for example, on Android, which I assume would be on the Venice, available on the Venice, how is that actually going to run? It's probably going to run as an app device at the backbone of the OS, right? So,
and we could touch on that in a second here when you're finished.
So it's actually on BlackBerry 10, the hub is going to be better. So if someone says, holy crap, I love the hub concept, but I don't like the hub as an app, and then they say, let's try it out on BlackBerry 10 device, maybe it'll bring someone over. So
I think that's the way the mobile sector is going too. You see Microsoft do it with Cortana, just getting a new beta released for Android recently, and they're basically throwing all their exclusive products out and services like Outlook and Word and Excel, those platforms that they've had, their Office suite, they have kept them proprietary for the most part until now. Now they're throwing them out into the last couple of years. They've thrown them out onto Android and iOS.
And who's actually getting on that bandwagon is actually Apple, with some new job listings looking for people to help bring some of their core applications over to Android, and whether that's Apple Music or some other stuff. They're getting into that, slowly easing into that, cross-platform thing, because they do see the benefit in trying to get consumers over to using their product. And you could look at the Venice and say, if I'm John Chen, I could say, okay, let's create this device to do mainly two things. Mainly, we bridge the app gap, as a lot of people call it. We bridge that functionality of having a BlackBerry, but also having access to millions of apps instead of being limited to not a hypervisor, but more Android runtime. But then you could also say this: if I sell this to an enterprise user who said, you know what, I like my BlackBerry, but I need my apps, so I have to leave, I have to get an Android, or my entire enterprise just switched to Android because BlackBerry's not capable of it. So I could sell it to them and say, hey, come back to BlackBerry because we have security, and now you have your apps there too. And maybe that's the main selling point. But to kind of jump back here, we talk about Hub on Android, on the Venice. And I showed off a bit of the Hub on it, like an experience, some of the experience suite stuff on my own personal channel. But if we talk about those experience suites being a core function of the Venice, we have to talk about the OS first. And if we're going to use some hypotheticals. Okay, so we have the Venice and it's running Android OS. Now this isn't Samsung's Android OS. This isn't Huawei's Android OS. This is BlackBerry's OEM Android OS. They take the core, stripped out, plain old Google Android. This is the stuff that the Nexus devices run. It's just plain old Android. And then you take it from that point. I can add gestures to that because it's now the OS that I'm building up. It's not something I'm taking. It's something I can build up from the ground along with the Android OS there. So I can integrate a Hub swipe. And I've heard that this thing you can swipe over and bring up the Hub. And whether that's an app launcher in terms of what you're actually doing in that gesture. It's totally possible for them to integrate gestures. It's totally possible for them to integrate a lot of those core functions and sell them as core functions. Now, it's not so much, I wouldn't say the Venice is so much to say, here's the hub, here's what the keyboard's like, so go out and buy a BlackBerry Passport. It's more so, the Venice has all these as a core built-in feature, but I can pull up my Samsung and get the enterprise, the productivity suites or the enterprise suites, and I can have the keyboard there and I can have the hub, but those are app-based, so I don't get the same experience. So regardless of whether I'm buying a BlackBerry Passport or BlackBerry Venice, I'm still giving my hardware sale to BlackBerry. And that's probably the selling point when we talk about incentives for buying a BlackBerry in general, moving forward into late 2015, early 2016, and changing what we know as a BlackBerry to being something completely new. Exciting, trivial, questionable times, absolutely. David, any questions you might have about the Venice? Like if you could ask someone who has a Venice in their hands right now, what would you ask? What would be your first question?
I think the first question would be, I hinted at it earlier, touched on it a fair amount, but that feel, that premium feel, because this, in partnering with Samsung, and this is something you can't see in photos, it's the feel itself, the physical feel. And Samsung, the danger of Samsung is that their devices are just, they're plasticky. I had a coworker the other day that had the S6 Edge and returned it after about a week because he said the hardware feel itself just wasn't up to snuff. He got an HTC basically to replace it because HTC's hardware it's got that edge to it. It's got that feels so much better in your hand. It feels more like a real device rather than just kind of a piece of plastic thrown together with some internals and whatnot. So that would be probably my biggest question if I was looking at someone that has the Venice in front of them is, hey, how does that feel? What does it seem like? Is it more passport-y or is it more, dare I say it, Z30?
Yeah, good question. And after the silver edition, one could say they better not make this thing dirt cheap because you get accustomed to certain luxuries of having the newer BlackBerries and you go, what the hell is this? It's like you take a leap and shove a QHD screen in it and go, okay, $800, please. If we were to close off our Venice discussion and just bring up price really quickly, as something Scott and I have talked about in the past, manufacturing cost for the Edge screens is substantial, and that cuts into profit. We're talking like close to $100 for one of these screens.
I think it was around $80 a screen.
It's like 80, yeah.
Yeah, I believe.
Upper range, right?
Yeah.
So, and you know what I mean? They can make a leap for, say, 180, 220 type thing. But then you're retailing it at close to 400. So you make some profit margin there. But if we have a device where we're paying close to 100 for a screen, and we have our other manufacturing costs, we're talking about new hybrid technology in the phone, all that garb. Price-wise, I think people are going to set their expectations either too high or too low. What's a fair price, David, for the Venice? To put you on the spot.
Oh yeah, perfect. Side note on that, the really, really nice screen, the counterpoint to that is battery life, and that's something that BlackBerry users love. The Passport is amazing for. But going to the question, the price point is tricky because it really depends on who they're aiming it at. And if they go with the Android core and aim that more of a normal consumer, sort of that route, the tricky part is they're battling the flagship devices from like OnePlus One and those type of companies that are selling them at not really a gain. And you see the profit margins for, I can't remember who it was. It might have been HTC or something like that. But these companies that are selling the Androids, their profit margins are basically nothing on each device. So price point depends on the market. So it depends, the good old dodge the question answer. But probably I want to say it should be cheaper because I feel like BlackBerry has really felt like their devices deserve this premium cost, and they haven't sold as well as we would all like them to, I think. And so I'm going to go with 600.
Yeah. David is a dreamer. He's yeah, and I think a lot of people go, yeah, 600. All right, take my money right now.
Yeah.
That's good. Sell devices.
But I would say actually even lower.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, for the pure fact of let's put devices in more people's hands. So let's take it barely, if anything, profit on, because hardware is not making money now as it is.
Mm-hmm.
So let's sell it at a low price. It's a new device. It's something different. It's something genuinely unique. It's BlackBerry at its core, i.e. a slider, which is something that they're the only ones that have ever done. And let's make this cheaper so that we can put it in as many people's hands as possible and make the bold statement, we're still here.
And that's the way you capture the market. And it's really, that goes into the larger question of should they go for the normal consumer and try and capture that market back. And I want the competition there. I want the other phone companies to excel because the competition is where the consumer really benefits from as far as they're fighting against each other. So we win ultimately. And so, yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah. And one topic we kind of raised over, and our final topic for this episode, so you kind of keep it a little bit shorter. I know we don't want to go over like an hour and a half here. 10.3.3. Something that's been very, very vague in terms of what BlackBerry's discussed. And there's been some exclusive stuff that I've seen posted on other channels that we won't slander, but we'll call a little bit hokum. Claims that 10.3.3 is sort of like Android, and it's more Android than BlackBerry 10, and it's going to debut with some Android-based passport. And I know people at this point are going, how many effing passports are they going to release? And but 10.3.3, it's something that's not talked about, and for all we know, it's because there's an Android element in it, and they don't want to give that away just yet. And I know if I had one feature request for 10.3.3 would probably be maybe some more updated design elements. I know BlackBerry 10 has a lot of cool stuff. It's great, but I'd like to see some updates happening more frequently when we have the point, whatever, so that we get some more, whether it's animations or whether it's new features. People definitely want to see that stuff. But for you, Scott, if you had one feature request for BlackBerry 10.3.3 on your passport, what would you request?
Some kind of Google Play services. And I think that's probably what a lot of people are looking for. In reality, that's the only thing missing from my phone. I love the OS as it sits right now. The only thing is I don't get access to all the apps. Not that I need all the apps. For example, the other day, my Kijiji app got updated through Snap, and also I needed Google Play services. So all you Canadians out there, if you're using Kijiji, don't update to the latest one. And I can't no longer use it. So I tried the whole patching route, which actually ruined it for me, and I can't even install an older version of Kijiji anymore. Oh well, it's gone. I'll use my computer and my tablet, just like we discussed earlier. But that's pretty well it, right? Ultimately, the runtime, I enjoy the runtime experience. I know a lot of people out there don't, and they think it's crap or whatever. Yeah, it's a Band-Aid solution. It's a piecemeal solution. I've had no issues with it. It gets me access to the applications that I need, plus the Google Play services ones. So reality is that's all I would want, which may happen, may not. Maybe that is the big secret that's been walking around, and maybe the building of a BlackBerry Android-powered device was what they needed to negotiate to get Google Play services in 10.3.3. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, so there's one small little thing that I came across the other day that I thought would be a nice addition is more utilization of the cloud, which is dangerous because BlackBerry is known for security, but if they do it right and they do it secure, it would be really neat. So one idea I had was syncing up the contacts, how you can sync them through Outlook or Gmail, and it tends to mess them all up and doesn't sync all the actual categories from your contacts on the phone. So little things a lot of the little things is what I'd like to see them improve. They've got the OS, I think, nailed as far as the big things, but I think if they take a look at what the other platforms are doing, and copying isn't the best idea sometimes. It's not how you get innovation, but sometimes it is. Look at Apple. They innovate very well by taking other things and making them really good. But subtle jab. I love my Apple products, though, just not the iPhone. So taking some of the little things and working into the OS, like the cloud backups for different things, I guess.
Yeah. And I think to end it off, what may be a good question is to ask our viewers, what is one 10.3.3 feature you would really like to see integrated? Whether it's Dark Hub or something a little bit more.
Dark Hub. Oh, no. He went there.
Oh God.
So
I gotta cover my head.
Whatever your feature request might be, shoot us a tweet at the BB Central. Be sure to subscribe to our BBM channel and drop us a comment. Or as per always, drop us a comment on the BlackBerryCentral.com website. And we'll be sure to give you a reply. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in episode number 9.
Cheers, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.